Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're opening up a section of scripture that is, well, it's visually pretty striking, isn't it?
It really is. And for many, maybe one of the most challenging parts of the Bible, the book of Revelation.
Exactly. We're zeroing in specifically on chapter 6 through the first part of chapter 8.
Right. And this is where the action, you could say, really picks up. The Lamb, who we learned earlier, is the only one worthy. He starts to interact with this sealed scroll.
Yeah, a scroll holding, well, immense significance. Picture the scene. This cosmic scroll, 7 seals in God's hand on the throne, and nobody, literally nobody in heaven or earth was worthy to even look at it.
A moment of real tension.
Totally. But then the Lamb appears, the one who was slain. Our sources identify him as Jesus, and he is worthy.
And he takes the scroll. So this part we're exploring, he begins breaking those seals one by one.
That's the setup.
And it's interesting, as each seal breaks, it doesn't immediately show us what's written on the scroll.
Sure.
Instead, it triggers these dramatic visions.
Visions, right. Prophetic glimpses, you might say.
Exactly. Into some really profound themes. The state of the world, divine justice as it unfolds,
Right.
and what it means to stay faithful under, well, intense pressure.
So our mission here, using the stack of sources you've gathered, is really to guide you, the listener, through these complex, sometimes pretty unsettling images.
We want to pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge, the key insights.
Helping you understand what these visions reveal. And not just about some far-off future, right?
No, absolutely not. About realities that have echoed through history and, frankly, impact our world right now.
It's like unpacking a complex tapestry, maybe. Each seal adds a thread, another layer.
That's a great way to put it. Revealing more about God's purposes, the reality of evil, suffering, but also the ultimate triumph of the Lamb and his followers.
Okay, let's dive in. Let's break open these visions, starting with those first 4 seals. Probably the most iconic imagery here.
The 4 horsemen.
Yes.
Everyone's heard of them, right? Pretty much. So the Lamb breaks the first 4 seals, a call goes out each time, and then boom, these 4 distinct horses and their riders emerge.
And our sources give some important context right away. This isn't totally new imagery for Revelation.
No, not conjured out of thin air. It's deeply rooted in the Old Testament prophets. Specifically, visions found in the book of Zechariah. Chapter 6 is key.
Zechariah 6, okay.
Yeah, this connection tells us John's vision is part of this long unfolding story in the Bible about God's control, his sovereignty over these, well, global forces.
That's such a crucial piece of context. So they're echoes of divine instruments seen before, but unleashed here as the Lamb opens the scroll.
Precisely.
Let's look at each one then. Seal number 1.
Seal 1 is broken. A white horse appears. Its rider gets a crown often seen as like a victory garland, a diadem, and he rides out conquering and to conquer.
Conquering and to conquer.
Our sources note the description's actually a bit sparse in John's text. The focus is really on the action, conquest.
So this figure represents that force of conquest. Aggressive expansion, empires, political power, that kind of thing.
Exactly. That relentless drive for domination that tries to bring others under its control. A force that, has kicked off immense change and often chaos throughout history. And notice, it goes out first.
Setting things in motion, okay.
Right.
And after conquest, unfortunately, its grim companion often follows.
It does. The second seal is opened. Out comes a fiery red horse.
Red. Makes sense.
The rider here is given a large sword and power. Power to take peace from the earth, causing people, well, to kill each other.
So this is war. Violent conflict, straight up.
Embodies that reality, yes. Shattering harmony, turning people against each other, bloodshed on a massive scale.
Yeah.
That phrase, taking peace from the earth, really highlights the devastation. It's not just nations fighting, it's the basic fabric of coexistence being torn apart.
Conquest, then war. And history definitely teaches us that war, upheaval, they often lead to desperate scarcity, don't they?
Which brings us directly to the third seal. A black horse appears.
Black horse, okay.
And its rider is holding a pair of scales, like balances. Then a voice is heard, coming from among the 4 living creatures.
What does it say?
It talks about specific prices for wheat and barley, but it also gives a command, do not harm the oil and the wine.
Scales, prices, but protecting oil and wine. What's the picture here?
It paints a picture of famine, yes, but also severe economic hardship. The scales mean careful rationing, weighing out basic grains like wheat and barley, They're scarce, they're expensive.
The voice courting prices reinforces that, likely exorbitant prices.
Exactly. And the command not to harm the oil and wine while the basics are costly, well, it might imply a real disparity. Essential food out of reach for many, while maybe luxury items remain available for the wealthy.
So it's widespread lack, economic injustice, the struggle just to survive.
That's the reality it represents.
That contrast is stark. Life-sustaining grains priced sky high, but oil and wine preserved. And these forces seem to just build, leading to the fourth horseman?
The fourth seal reveals a pale horse. The color is often described as pale green or ashen, like the color of decay or sickness.
Ugh, not good.
No. And its rider is named Death.
Named Death.
And Hades follows closely behind him.
Hades, like the underworld, the realm of the dead.
Exactly. So this horseman represents the ultimate consequence of the first three.
Yeah.
Widespread death, the grave itself. Death rides out, and Hades, the realm of the dead, follows, symbolizing this isn't just isolated deaths, but a torrent sweeping huge numbers away.
Our sources really point out that direct, terrifying link Death and Hades actively following the others.
They do. It's a grim procession.
So we have this sequence: conquest, leading to war, often bringing famine, and ultimately widespread death. A pattern we see again and again in history.
Sadly, yes.
And our sources are really clear on something crucial about these four figures, aren't they?
They are. A really vital insight is that these aren't just symbols waiting for one single future moment.
Yeah.
Yes, they have a prophetic side, but they also represent persistent realities. Human condition stuff. History stuff.
Things that have always been with us.
These forces, political conquest, violence, economic devastation, death, they've plagued civilizations for millennia. And critically, our sources stress they're also present realities. They impact our world today.
Right. You don't have to look far, unfortunately. Conflict, scarcity, death. It's around us.
It grounds the vision, doesn't it? It's not just out there or way later. It's describing pain and struggle that's been part of life on Earth. It still is.
It really does.
And the sources add this profound theological layer. These forces, destructive as they are, John's vision shows them riding out under God's sovereignty.
Meaning
Meaning they aren't just random chaos, totally independent of God's awareness or ultimate control. They operate within limits, within permissions set by divine authority.
that can be a hard truth to wrestle with. God's sovereignty even over suffering.
It presents that tension head on, definitely. But importantly, our sources also give the necessary counterbalance to that difficult idea. They do. Despite how real, how persistent these sources are. The sources explicitly say the four horsemen are not the final word.
Not the final word, okay.
They represent aspects of a fallen world, consequences of human choices, yes, but their power isn't ultimate. Their ride doesn't mean God's plan is defeated or his purposes are thwarted. They're temporary in the grand scheme of eternity.
That distinction feels vital. Powerful present, yes, but not paramount. Operating within God's framework, but not having the last say.
Precisely. And this framing, as the sources lay it out, it really invites you, the listener, to reflect.
Well, so?
Well, how do you see these forces, conquest, war, famine, death, showing up in the world around you? In the news, maybe even closer to home. And what does it mean for you personally, or for us together, to live knowing these devastating forces operate under God's permission somehow? Yet they are explicitly not the end. It calls for a perspective beyond the immediate chaos, doesn't it?
It really does. That sets a powerful, if sobering, stage. We've seen the broad strokes of global suffering with the first four seals, but then the vision shifts, doesn't it? Becomes much more focused, more personal with the fifth seal.
Yes, exactly. The fifth seal moves us from those sweeping global realities to a very specific and I think deeply poignant scene within the heavenly realm itself. John sees souls beneath the heavenly altar.
Beneath the altar, a place linked with sacrifice, offering, prayer. Who are these souls?
The sources identify them very specifically. They are the souls of those who had been slain for their faith, for the word of God and the testimony they had maintained. These are the martyrs.
Martyrs. Those who paid the ultimate price for their allegiance to the Lamb.
That's right. So amidst these visions of widespread, kind of general suffering from the horsemen, Revelation zooms right in on this group who suffered specifically because of their beliefs.
And what are they doing there, beneath the altar?
They're crying out to God. And their cry, our sources quote it directly, is a powerful question. How long, sovereign Lord, holy and true, until you judge and avenge our blood?
How long? Wow, that question just echoes, doesn't it, through the Psalms, the prophets. The laments of God's people facing injustice down through history.
It absolutely does. It's an ancient cry. And the sources give some key analysis here. They really emphasize this isn't just a selfish plea for personal revenge.
Sure.
It's framed as a cry for justice, a deep yearning for God, the sovereign Lord, holy and true, to act according to his own character, to vindicate his holiness and truth by addressing the profound injustice of his faithful followers being killed for their faith.
They're appealing to God's righteousness,
Right.
his authority.
Exactly.
So how does the sovereign Lord respond to this cry from beneath the altar?
They get both comfort and instruction. First, each one is given a white robe.
White robe. What's the significance of that?
Our sources are clear. It's a symbol of their vindication. Think about it. In the world's eyes, they were defeated, silenced, executed. But here, before God's heavenly court, they're declared righteous, pure, validated. It's a divine well done, an affirmation of their faithfulness right up to death.
The powerful visual, God recognizing and honoring their sacrifice. But they asked, how long? Do they get a timing update on the justice part?
They're told to rest a little longer.
Rest a little longer.
And the reason given, well, it carries a sobering weight. They're told to wait until the full number of their fellow servants, their brothers and sisters who are also to be killed just as they had been, is completed.
So it indicates that persecution, martyrdom for faith, it's not over yet. More will join them.
That's the implication. It speaks to this ongoing conflict, doesn't it, between God's kingdom and the forces in the world resisting it.
That adds a layer of difficulty. Vindication, yes, but the reality of suffering for believers on earth continues. More deaths are foreseen.
It does. And this scene, as our sources highlight, prompts some important reflection for us. Like, what does this vision tell us about the reality, maybe even the inevitability, of suffering for your beliefs in a hostile world? It's presented as historical fact and future reality.
And also, how does it show God remembering and validating those who dies for faith?
Exactly. God sees them. He hears them. He vindicates them with those white robes. And he promises eventual justice, even if the timeline includes more suffering for others first. Their lives, their deaths, they matter immensely in God's economy.
It's a scene of both validation and, a stark acknowledgement of the cost of faithfulness. And this cry for justice, this promise that the number isn't complete yet, it seems to lead right into the next big event.
Yes, the opening of the sixth seal brings another radical shift in focus, in intensity. After the global suffering, the specific martyr's cry, the sixth seal unleashes what our sources call the great day of the Lord.
The day of the Lord, that's a huge concept throughout the Old Testament prophets, isn't it?
Absolutely huge. And our sources explicitly point out the biblical roots here. They link this vision directly to descriptions you find in prophets like Isaiah, maybe Isaiah 2, and Joel, like Joel 2.
So Revelation is drawing on these established themes of God's ultimate intervention, his judgment.
It is, reinforcing that connection.
So what happens on this day? What are the terrifying phenomena the sources describe?
Oh, the descriptions are truly cataclysmic. The sources detail a massive earthquake, the sun turning black like sackcloth made of goat hair, the full moon turning blood red,
Whoa.
stars falling from the sky to the earth like late figs dropping from a tree in a strong wind. The sky itself vanishes like a scroll being rolled up. Every mountain, every island is removed from its place.
It sounds like the complete dissolution of the natural order, cosmic upheaval.
That's exactly what it is. Total breakdown of the created order as we know it.
How do people on Earth react to that kind of display?
The reaction is universal. And it's desperate. Our sources describe everyone, from kings and generals, the rich, the powerful, right down to every slave and free person. Everyone is hiding.
No status protects you.
None. No earthly status offers any exemption or protection in this moment.
Where do they try to hide from something so overwhelming?
They run to the caves, among the rocks of the mountains. And in their terror, their desperation just peaks. They actually cry out to the mountains and the rocks.
What do they say?
They plead, "Fall on us, hide us. Hide us from the face of him who sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb."
They'd rather be crushed by mountains than face God and the Lamb in this moment.
That's how the sources depict the sheer terror. It unveils their utter helplessness. This is terrifying because it's the full weight of God's holiness, his righteous wrath, crashing down on a broken, sinful world that has largely rejected him and, as we just saw, persecuted his people.
It's like the martyr's cry for justice starting to find its answer.
In a huge, sweeping display of divine power, yes.
And right in this moment, this universal hiding and desperation, those on Earth ask a critical question.
They do. They cry out, fully recognizing their vulnerability. Who is able to stand?
Faced with God's manifest glory and judgment, their power, wealth, status means nothing. They know they can't endure it.
Utterly unable.
And our sources point out that this specific question acts as a kind of pivot point in John's vision.
Absolutely. The sources make it explicit. That question, who is able to stand, it directly sets the stage for what John sees next. The vision that follows provides the profound and maybe surprising answer to that desperate cry from the caves.
Okay, so Revelation actually pauses the action here. Pauses the cosmic judgment at this critical point to answer that fundamental question. Who can stand when the world is shaking?
It does. It's a dramatic pause, and then the vision shifts right after the question is asked. John sees 4 angels standing at the 4 corners of the earth.
4 corners everywhere.
Symbolizing total reach, yes. And they're holding back the 4 winds, preventing more destruction from hitting the land or sea or trees for a moment.
A pause in the destruction.
Then he sees another angel ascending from the east, from the rising sun. And this angel carries the seal of the living God.
An angel with God's seal. What does this angel do?
He cries out loudly to those 4 angels holding back the winds, tells them, don't harm the earth or the sea or the trees until we have sealed the servants of our God on their foreheads.
Sealing God's servants on their foreheads. What's the purpose of this seal?
The sources describe it primarily as a mark of protection. Divine ownership, identification. It signifies these people belong to God. They're under his spiritual preservation, his protection, during these times of judgment and upheaval.
So protection, does that mean they won't suffer at all? Like physically, we just saw the martyrs.
That's a key point. It doesn't necessarily guarantee exemption from all suffering or even physical death, as the martyrs clearly show. But it signifies spiritual security, their ultimate safety in Christ, regardless of what happens physically.
Got it. Spiritual security. So John sees the angel with the seal, hears the command. What does he perceive next?
He hears something specific. He hears the number of those who are sealed.
He hears a number. Okay, what is it?
The number John hears is 144,000.
144,000.
And the description he hears is very precise. 12,000 from each of the 12 tribes of Israel. It firmly anchors that number, as heard, to the historical tribes.
12 tribes, 12,000 each. And our sources mention something about the sound or feel of this number and its breakdown, right?
Yeah, they describe it as sounding very much like a military roll call. Or maybe, yes, this heard versus seen contrast, it's absolutely vital. What John hears often seems to represent a limited, maybe earthly or even old covenant perspective. But then what he sees reveals a deeper, fuller, more expansive, heavenly reality.
Like earlier when you heard about the conquering Lion of Judah.
But turned and saw a lamb looking as if it had been slain, conquering through sacrifice. Same dynamic here. He hears this specific finite number, 144,000, tied to national Israel, presented like an army list.
Okay. So what does he see immediately after hearing that?
He sees something completely different in scale and scope. Vast, glorious, overwhelming. He sees a great multitude. And the sources really focus on describing this multitude in detail because this is the true answer to who is able to stand.
Tell us about this great multitude John sees standing there.
Well, first, their origin. It's described as from every nation, from all tribes and peoples and languages.
Every nation, tribe, people, language. So not just Israel, global, multi-ethnic.
Totally global. Drawn from every corner of humanity. And their number. It's explicitly called a great multitude that no one could number.
No one could number it. So he hears a specific number, 144,000, but he sees an uncountable multitude.
Exactly. The contrast is stark. From one nation, as heard, to every nation, as seen. From a specific countable number to an innumerable host.
Where are they? What are they doing?
They are standing before the throne and before the Lamb. That position is key. It signifies their access, their acceptance, their place of worship and service, right in God's presence with the Redeemer. They aren't hiding in caves. They're standing confidently in the light of God's glory.
Standing, answering the question, and their appearance. You said it links back.
Yes, they are clothed in white robes. Just like the martyrs under the altar were given white robes.
Symbolizing vindication, cleansing.
Right. Their participation in the Lamb's victory. And they're holding palm branches in their hand.
Palm branch.
Like celebration.
Victory.
Often associated with that, yes. Celebration, victory, triumph. Maybe recalling Jesus' triumphal entry into Jerusalem.
Okay, the contrast couldn't be clearer. Here's specific, national, military number from Israel sees vast, uncountable global multitude from everywhere in white robes, holding victory palms, standing before God and the Lamb.
And our sources stress just how profound this sight is. This great, innumerable multitude is the true people of God, drawn from all humanity, redeemed by the Lamb. It's identified as the kingdom of priests from every nation.
This is the fulfillment of God's promise to Abraham.
That's how the sources frame it, yes. That ancient promise that through Abraham's offspring, all peoples on earth would be blessed, that he'd be the father of many nations. What John heard was maybe like the remnant of the physical line. What he sees is the vast, spiritual, multi-ethnic family redeemed through the Messiah, the Lamb.
It's God's covenant family, fully realized, way beyond any single nation or earthly census. And this multitude, this global group, they are the direct answer to that terrified question from the sixth seal: who is able to stand?
They're able to stand, this innumerable multitude. And the sources make it crystal clear why they can stand when kings and generals are running for the hills.
Why?
It's not their own strength, not their numbers in an earthly sense, not weapons, not status. They can stand, the text says, because they have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb, and because they are sealed by grace.
So their standing has nothing to do with their own merit or power. It's all about the Lamb's redemptive work.
Entirely. It's imputed righteousness, cleansing through his sacrifice, divine protection through the seal. It just completely flips worldly notions of power upside down.
Yeah, those relying on earthly might hide in terror, but those redeemed by a slain lamb stand victoriously.
Exactly. And the power of this heard versus seen contrast. It suggests God's true army is true people who endure. They aren't defined by earthly things like power or national identity or military structure. They're defined by redemption, global inclusion through Christ, and that spiritual sealing.
It really challenges any narrow or exclusive view of God's people. His kingdom is built from every tribe, every tongue, standing strong through grace, not force.
That's the picture.
And this brings us to another really profound paradox the sources highlight. How does this heavenly army actually conquer?
Yes. This is where Revelation gives us this radical countercultural vision of power and victory. Because when we think army, conquering, we usually think
Dominance, military might, overcoming enemies with force.
right. But our sources describe how this great multitude overcomes, how they conquer, very differently.
So what is their weapon? What's their method?
Their weapon, as one source puts it very directly, is their witness.
Their witness. Not swords, not political maneuvering, their testimony.
Yes. And the sources explain how they're called to conquer. And it's nothing like worldly conquest. It's not by killing their enemies. It's not through political or military domination.
How then?
They conquer by being willing to suffer, by testifying to the truth of the gospel, even when facing opposition, by loving their enemies. One source specifically says they conquer by suffering and bearing witness, like the Lamb.
Like the Lamb, the one who conquered sin and death not by force but by willingly laying down his own life. That just, it redefines everything, doesn't it? Power, victory.
It absolutely does. This idea of conquering through suffering, through faithful witness, it radically challenges our assumptions about how change happens, how justice is won, what real strength looks like. The world seeks power through dominance. God's kingdom seems to advance through sacrificial love and enduring testimony.
There's that core paradox of God's kingdom, one of the sources mentioned.
Yes, that in God's kingdom, the first are last and the way up is down, that inverted logic.
Yeah.
It perfectly describes how the Lamb conquered and how his followers are called to live and conquer too.
Through humility, service, embracing suffering for truth.
Self-giving love. That's where God's power is shown most clearly, how his kingdom gains ground, not by grabbing worldly power or achieving political dominance.
And this whole method is just a direct reflection of the Lamb himself, the one opening the scroll. They conquer by following his sacrificial model.
Precisely. Their victory isn't achieved despite suffering, but often through their faithfulness in suffering. That faithfulness itself becomes a powerful witness to the Lamb's transforming power.
Okay. So we've journeyed through the first 6 seals, the 4 horsemen representing pervasive suffering, the martyrs' cry and their vindication, the terrifying day of the Lord, the revelation of God's global, redeemed people who stand through the Lamb and conquer like him. Now, the final seal in this sequence, seal number 7. What happens?
Well, after all that drama, all that cosmic upheaval and profound revelation, the opening of the 7th and final seal is described in the sources with almost startling simplicity.
Really? What's the immediate result in heaven?
Silence.
Silence.
Yep.
After the horseman's calls, the martyr's cries, the cosmic roar, the multitude's praise, silence. That seems counterintuitive.
It does, right. And that's part of its power. The sources mention the duration for about half an hour.
half an hour of silence in heaven. Wow.
There's profound stillness in the heavenly realm.
What could that possibly signify, this dramatic silence after everything else?
Our sources offer a few potential interpretations. One is simply seeing it as a dramatic pause. After the intensity of seals 1 through 6, and that interlude showing the sealed multitude, there's this moment of profound stillness before the next phase kicks off.
Like the quiet before the storm.
Exactly. Or maybe a reverent silence, like the held breath before a final, decisive act. It's not just an absence of noise, it's a loaded silence. Significant stillness that demands attention.
A silence filled with anticipation, awe.
Precisely. And the sources suggest this silence demands something from those experiencing it. John, and by extension us, the readers. It demands awe faced with God's unfolding plan. It demands intense attention to whatever is coming next, and maybe even repentance, given the judgment shown and still anticipated.
A sacred pause underscoring the gravity of it all.
That's the feeling.
And do our sources connect this silence directly to what follows in Revelation?
They do. The article source notes this silence is the transition point. Now, the 7th seal is opened, but the sources indicate this section ends before the scroll itself is fully unrolled and read. That comes later.
Okay, so what does this silence lead to immediately?
It immediately precedes the emergence of the 7 warning trumpets. They are prepared right after the 7th seal is broken and during this silence.
Ah, the 7 trumpets,
Yeah.
signaling further stages of judgment. Right?
They do.
Yeah.
And the sources just briefly mention the outcome tied to the trumpet sequence, saying they lead toward the day of the Lord, bringing final justice once and for all. So the silence is this solemn, anticipatory hush, like God holding his breath before the trumpets sound, signaling the next wave of his interactions with earth, building toward that final resolution.
That mention effectively bridges us from this deep dive into what might lie ahead in Revelation.
Exactly.
Wow, okay, that's an incredibly dense, incredibly powerful sequence of visions just packed into a few chapters.
It really is.
From the horsemen riding across the earth, symbolizing suffering, to the martyrs' cries being heard and validated, through cosmic judgment, to that breathtaking vision of God's global, redeemed people, standing firm, conquering through witness.
All culminating in that profound anticipatory silence.
It's quite a journey through suffering, justice, redemption.
Mm-hmm. And as we sort of wrap up this particular deep dive, trying to summarize the main message just from the source material we've looked at, chapters 6 to early 8, the core takeaway seems pretty clear.
And what would you say that is? What should the listener really hold on to from this section?
I think it's that suffering and struggle, all the kinds represented by the horsemen, by the martyrs. They are undeniably real. They're present. They're hard parts of the world's story. But, and this is the key, they're absolutely not the end of the story.
The narrative isn't just chaos spinning out of control.
Not at all. The sources consistently point back to the central active role of the Lamb. He was slain, right? He experienced the ultimate suffering, injustice, death. But because of that, he's the one worthy to open the scroll, to orchestrate these events. He is sovereignly guiding history, even through judgment and tribulation, toward that ultimate goal, redemption and justice.
And those who follow this Lamb, they get a distinct identity, a unique call out of all this.
They absolutely do. As we saw in that vision of the great multitude, and as the sources describe, they are sealed, redeemed from everywhere, and called to bear witness.
And that witness, their way of standing, conquering, it's expressed how?
Not with conventional power, not force, not violence, not swords, not political might, but with lives shaped by the sacrificial love, the enduring faithfulness of the Lamb himself.
It's just such a radical call to courage, to faithfulness, maybe even to death, and a complete rethinking of what power, victory, and belonging really mean in God's kingdom.
It truly is. And maybe as you, the listener, continue to reflect on this challenging, but ultimately, I think, hope-filled section of Revelation, we could leave you with some questions. These come directly from the reflections offered in one of our source materials. Questions to just sit with.
Okay, what are they?
What does it mean for you to live as one sealed by God? Right now, in the midst of a world that clearly still experiences the realities of those horsemen.
That's a big one.
And then, are you willing to follow the Lamb? To bear witness in his way, the way of suffering witness, of love even when it costs you dearly.
Right, yeah.
And finally, drawing from that moment of cosmic terror, that question cried from the caves, will you stand when the world shakes? Not in your own strength, obviously, but by the blood of the Lamb.
Deep questions indeed, arising right out of this vision of judgment, martyrs, and this incredible redeemed multitude.
They really do.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We really trust it's given you some valuable insights and maybe a lot to reflect on from this vital part of Revelation.
Keep exploring these themes.
Absolutely.